Welcome back to the channel. Today we got culture shocks as an American living in Italy. Italian culture shocks, and this is from Shay Jordan. So I'm excited to hop into this and see from the American perspective what it's like living in Italy. With that being said, we're smoking all my dragons, divine righteous, almighty greats, overachieving, never slacking, and we back with another video. Here we go.
Welcome to or back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Shay and I'm an American who's been living in Bologna, Italy for 2 years now. In today's video, I want to reflect on some of the culture shocks I had when I moved from the US to Italy, because I've been thinking about some of these things now that I've been here for a few years and how a lot of these things just seem normal to me, and how I even experience a little bit of reverse culture shock when I go back to the US. So I thought this would be a fun video because it's always interesting to see the differences between the US and Italy. So let's get into these culture shocks. One thing that was really different for me when I first got here was that a lot of businesses close for a certain amount of hours in the afternoon. So it's really common for small shops or restaurants to close between 2 and 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., basically a few hours in the afternoon, and they reopen again. A lot of smaller shops typically have a break between 2 and 4:30 or 2 and 5, so you always have to check online if you want to go somewhere. Because for example, one time I wanted to go print something out, so I had to go to a print shop, but they were closed during this amount of time, so I had to choose to go before or after. So things like that, I'm just not used to it because in the US we don't have that. The stores are open all day. And then as far as restaurants, they basically have their lunch hour and then they close and reopen for dinner. So a lot of times, especially if you're going to a small town, if you end up arriving around like 1 or 2, you should think about getting lunch right away, because as I mentioned, if you end up somewhere and you're there around 3 or 4, it's going to be really hard to find a food place. I feel like in the US, it doesn't really matter if you have a late lunch, you can always find something, but here it's a little bit different. And speaking of meals, the second thing that was a culture shock for me was that dinner here happens a lot later. In the US, I think it's totally normal to have dinner around 6 or 6:30, maybe even earlier. I think whenever I go home, my parents have dinner around like 5:30 or 6, which now to me seems so early. But here in Italy, it's totally normal to have dinner around 8 or 8:30, which when I first got here, I was like, how? I'm so
Yeah, I grew up definitely eating dinner later on. I feel like that's kind of a toss up in America for sure, because America's like so diverse with so much different people. Then just the working culture in America too. It's just it be up in the air. It be up in the air.
so hungry. Like I want to eat at 6 p.m. And still, especially if I'm making dinners at home, sometimes I will have dinner at 6:30 because I'm hungry and I just want to eat dinner. But if you go out to dinner, it's very common to make reservations around 8 or 8:30. But also here, it's very common to do aperitivo, which is like drinks and a little snack before dinner. Usually when I do aperitivo, I end up just having that for my meal because you can get like a huge board of meats and cheeses. It depends. Sometimes aperitivo does become my dinner, but a lot of Italians kind of have it before, so that happens around like 5 or 6. And then that way it can like tide you over for dinner. The third culture shock is that people stare here a lot. People are always just staring. I always feel like there's eyes on me. And a lot of people say like, oh, it's because people can tell that you're a foreigner or you're blonde, whatever. Makes sense. But I've just also heard from my other American friends who are also very aware of the fact that people are very aware of the fact that people are constantly staring. And I've heard other people who live in Germany, for example, like other foreigners who live in Germany, and they say in Germany it's even worse. Like people really, really stare. So that's kind of like the joke that I've heard as well. I just don't understand why. Like I think it's just acceptable for people to just stare at you. I mentioned in a previous video that I was on a bus once with my friend, and this woman was just like, when we walked by her on the bus, like turned around to keep staring at my friend specifically, not like the both of us. She was just staring like daggers at my friend. Like I couldn't tell if she looked angry. I couldn't tell if she recognized her, if she was just so fascinated by my.
That definitely happens enough in New York.
I have no idea. And I could tell, I kind of like glanced at the woman, but I don't know. I understand people watching. Like I love a good, people watching, but not just like obviously staring at them. Or like my favorite is if you're waiting in line and people will just turn all the way around to like just stare at you. Like, turn back around, don't look at me. I don't know, people here have no shame, I guess. Speaking of lines, this is a mini culture shock. Speaking of lines, Italians like don't know how to make a line. It's funny to me because when Italians line up, it's really just like a group. They all crowd around. It's a crowd. There's no line. When I'm waiting in line somewhere, it makes me so anxious because I can sense like the people start to move up. Like they will stand right next to you in line. And it makes me anxious. I'm like, are they trying to get in front of me? Like, and sometimes they do. Sometimes I'm like, there is a line, but people just walk in front of you. I've been ordering and I've been in line at a cafe, and usually people will ask you, you know, in Italian, are you in line? Yes, I appreciate that. But there are some people who will just like, they see you, they look at you, and they just don't care. But yeah, the whole lining up thing is not, I just feel like the way Italians make lines makes me so anxious because it's not like a single file. It's just, let's all crowd around. My next culture shock is just watching the way Italians debate or argue. I think a lot of people who don't understand Italian think that Italians are always yelling or fighting, which it can sound like that. But actually, I think they're just like very passionate about what they're talking about. Like if they are arguing, they're not really like fighting. Like I feel like people in the US, especially if you bring up like a political topic, like people get super angry. But here in Italy, you can have discussions. They just get very passionate about the point they're trying to make. So it sounds like they're yelling at each other. It sounds like they're mad, but like I don't think they actually are. They're just very heated and passionate. But I also have just seen them argue over tiny, tiny little things. They say things very confidently, even if they're not true, but they can be very convincing. They just are able to do that somehow. Another culture shock for me was the longer meal times, which I think a lot of Americans have heard by now. This culture shock whenever we go anywhere else in the world, because for us, lunch times and meal times are just like super fast. When I talk to Italians here and I tell them how a lot of people in the workplace eat lunch at their desks, maybe take like 10 to 15 minutes for lunch, like don't even take a break, but want to keep like working and eat in front of their computer. The Italians are just like mind blown because it's so wild to them. Most of the Italians I know have at least like an hour lunch break. And you go have lunch, you like get away from work, you're not sitting at your desk, you're actually taking time to enjoy lunch and like talk with your colleagues or be around other people, enjoy your
America is usually only a half hour for the most part as far as breaks.
time. A lot of Italians have like Sunday lunches with their families, and that takes a while. I feel like we don't have this kind of tradition in the US. I do feel like even if you go out to meals with your friends, like you're not spending a lot of time. It's very rushed. Even when you're out at restaurants in the US, the waiter will
She's correct. It's definitely a very rushed, fast food lifestyle.
constantly come by and be like, do you need anything else? Do you need anything else? You feel very rushed. They'll even bring over the check while you're still eating. You're trying to finish your meal and they're kind of like, okay, bye, let's go. Whereas in Italy, it's a lot more laid back and chill. The meal times, you're not rushed at all. You can enjoy your food, you can chat. You have all these different courses. You have like the first course of pasta and stuff, and then, you know, your main, you get coffee at the end. So it's just a lot more relaxed. The next culture shock was certain, I guess, just like rules of being polite or like greeting. For example, when you go into a cafe or a store, you just walk in and you immediately say, ciao, buongiorno, like to immediately greet the people when you're walking in, which is very much like a courtesy, like politeness thing that you just do. And I feel like sometimes that happens in the US if it's like a small little coffee shop, but you wouldn't walk into like some big store and be like, hey, everybody, you know, like that's just not a thing that we do in the US. And I feel like it's nice here because you walk in and you say buongiorno, like even if you're not directly looking at someone, you just say it. And then usually like all the baristas or the
Buongiorno. But I definitely gonna have to practice that.
people in the restaurant or store will be like, ciao, buongiorno, you know, that kind of thing. So it's nice. And I feel like if you don't do it, it's not like super frowned upon, but it's just like a courtesy thing that you do when you walk in somewhere. Also, just within their language, they have the formal form, like in Spanish and a lot of other languages. There's just a different form that you use when you're talking to someone older than you, someone that you don't know, someone in a professional setting. So there's just that level of like formality that is built within the language. My next culture shock that is really frustrating actually is that most Italian places don't have screens in the windows, which is just insane to me because first off, air conditioning is not widespread in Italy. They do have air conditioning. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I literally have air conditioning in this room and in my apartment, but that's rare. I've lived in about 5 different apartments here in Bologna, and I've only had air conditioning in 2 of them. So air conditioning is not really popular here because it's also very expensive, and that's another culture shock about air conditioning not being everywhere. As someone who's from Arizona, air conditioning is a necessity. But yeah, because here in the summer you leave all your windows open, so of course your house just gets filled with bugs and mosquitoes. I've had wasps and bees inside my apartment because there's no screens on the window, and to me that just seems like common sense. Like, it would make things so much better. I would
Need the screens. I can't, waking up, getting bit up, and yeah, nah. Need them screens.
have my windows wide open if I had screens. Most Italian apartments don't have screens, and I'm sure you could get them installed. I just don't understand why it's not a common thing. I feel like it would solve so many problems. You wouldn't have all these bugs in your house all the time. I don't know. Again, who knows? If someone could give me a good reason why there aren't screens on the windows here, that would be great. And my next culture shock is that dryers are not very common here. Of course they exist. Some people have them. People always come at me when I say, oh, they don't have dryers here. Like, yes, of course they exist. You can get a dryer here. But all of the 5 apartments that I've lived in here, and including my apartment when I lived back in Rome, did not have a dryer. A lot of people don't have dryers here. Maybe people who have nice apartments and they're very wealthy, maybe they get a dryer, I don't know. It's mostly common to just hang dry your clothes here. And for me, since I don't have a balcony, I have to put my clothes on what's called like a stendino, which is basically a drying rack, I guess. And then my clothes will take like 2 days to dry, especially in the winter. Like if you're not getting a lot of sun through the window and the clothes are just sitting there, they take a while to dry. So that can be frustrating because you have to think ahead and plan ahead. If you know you need certain clothes for a certain day or for a certain trip, you have to think, oh, I have to make sure I do my laundry ahead of time. So, but of course dryers, there's positives and negatives. It would be more expensive, and also, drying your clothes at high heat can probably destroy them faster. So I guess, good and bad. But I definitely am looking forward to having a dryer when I go back to the US. My next culture shock is that here in Italy, you basically have to do everything in person or maybe by phone. This is something that I really cannot stand because at least in the US, I would say that things are very efficient because you can do a lot of things digitally. Everything that I had to do for this apartment, I had to go to an office in order to do it. I wanted to set up internet. I had to go into the actual internet, like Vodafone store or Fastweb, and long story short, internet didn't work out, so I don't have internet in this apartment. Long story, don't want to get into it, but another fun thing about organization and Italian stuff. And then setting up my trash tax payment, which here in Bologna, you also need to get a card to open up one of the bins for like the trash sorting. So when I talked to my landlord, she said, you have to go to this office. She gave me the address and fill out this form so that way the tax payment will be under your name. Then I said, oh, okay, great. So is that where I also get the card? She said, no, that's in a different office. Like, this is very typical for Italy. You can do one thing here, but then you have to go somewhere else to get another thing. And I'm just like, why is this not all in the same place? Or just like digitally? Like, it's a card. I feel like I should just be able to get that sent to me. Finally got that all figured out. I had to go to an office, pick up my card. I also will have to go back to that office because apparently they can't send me the bill because I don't have the ability to log into this like system that Italians use because I'm not Italian. So I'm gonna have to go back to the office when I have to pay my bill. I'm just not even thinking about that right now. And then of course to
Definitely sounds like a headache.
actually do this.
But I guess that's expected. Anytime. Well, hold on. Accidentally put my headphones out there. But I guess that's expected anytime going overseas and or to a new place. There's gonna be something that's kind of hard, and difficult being new.
Switch to all the utilities in my name. also had to go into an office and bring a bunch of documents, fill out a bunch of documents, and that was just a nightmare. But luckily, once I got it all figured out, I'm good to go. I don't want to have to think about when I have to do that again when I inevitably move. But really hate that nothing can be done online because, for example, when I moved in LA, when I switched the utilities to my name, everything can be done online super fast. You get an email confirmation that's like, okay, now you're paying the bills kind of thing. Don't even get me started on the renewal for my permit to stay. I wish that stuff was also online. At least the renewal, I feel like, could be online, considering that the last time I went to the police station for my renewal, they literally told me that they lost my documents, the ones that I had sent through the post office. They lost them. So again, why can't this just be digital? My next culture shock revolves around food and the ideas around food, beliefs around food. Attitudes towards food here are very different. Here, it's totally normal to eat pasta every day, and not in the sense of like, you know, Americans saying like, oh, Italians just eat a ton of pasta every day. Like, you have a small portion, but it's very common for pasta to be your lunch every day, like different varieties, different forms of pasta, but it's totally fine to eat it every day. But I would say that what I've learned is that pasta is more of a lunch food because their idea is that you eat pasta, you eat this carb because, you know, you're moving or you're on the go throughout the day. Wouldn't eat like a huge plate of pasta at night right before you're about to go to sleep. That's why it's totally fine to eat pasta because you use that energy throughout your day. Whereas in the US, I feel like a lot of the idea around pasta is like, oh, eating a lot of pasta is so bad for you. It's so unhealthy. Pasta and pizza, that's bad. Don't eat a lot of that. Which I'm sure we have different kinds of pasta and like our pizza and all that kind of stuff because of our ingredients and the preservatives and stuff that we do put in our food. Like, yes, the quality is probably not as good as here. It's interesting how we view these different foods here in Italy versus the US. Also, one tiny thing is that I noticed that Italians eat salad maybe with their meal or after, whereas in the US, it's pretty common to eat salad as your appetizer. You eat it before any of the other food.
I've always, even though she's right, she's correct, it usually is an appetizer for sure, but I've always preferred to eat it with my food. She actually just made me realize how much I'm gonna get a salad today, how much I'm craving a salad. But yeah, I always like to eat it with my food. Like, I even, if I'm eating pizza, I'll even take my salad and put it on top of the food. So, um, yeah, Italians, I mean, they got it right with that. That was just always something naturally I did. I just felt like it tasted really good.
And here, a lot of Italians will eat it after, at the end. That's interesting. I don't know why. As far as breakfast, pastries are very common. It's very rare to get like a salty breakfast unless you're getting a salty croissant or something. Breakfast is usually very small. It's totally normal to eat like little cookies, these basically like hard little cookies. You don't eat a ton of them. But again, for me, this was just weird because eating cookies for breakfast just seems like a dream when I was a
They got something right because a lot of Italians seem to be in very good shape.
kid, but very strange for me. Also, because in the US, I typically prefer salty breakfasts like eggs and avocado.
But then again, American Italian's a little different, for sure. For sure. A lot of them ones I grew up with, I mean, what? They eat like big, big. There was this one kid named, what was it, Nico? Football player. I mean, he would eat cheeseburgers back to back. I mean, it was insane.
Toast. Now I mainly will eat like yogurt and some fruit or oatmeal, and then still sometimes eggs because I'm American and I still love my eggs. Sometimes just to start my day, I will have coffee and then a few of those little cookies, but it's still so weird that like here, my boyfriend and I will eat even like brownies, or you can eat a piece of cake for breakfast, which is just like, but I mean, I guess in the US we have things like muffins, which is basically a cake, or like a coffee cake. So we do have these pastries. I just feel like it's not as common. Like here, they literally sell. They have
I used to love coffee cakes. Y'all remember them Little Debbie coffee cakes? Whew, they off the market in America now, but growing up, those was like top tier for me.
an aisle full of all these different types of breakfast cookies. Okay, we're almost getting to the end. I know there's a lot, but these are interesting, I hope. The next one is their belief of things that will make you sick. These still, to this day, I don't understand, and they actually make me kind of mad because I'm just like, what is the reasoning? Like, what is the logic behind this? Classic wet hair don't go outside with wet hair. Don't don't keep your hair wet for a while because your neck will get stiff and will hurt. They have like a specific term for this that
So one of my exes was Italian. She actually used to say that, like, going outside with your hair wet would make you sick. I didn't know anything about that, but it's my first. This the only other time I'm hearing this. That's crazy.
like apparently happens. I used to keep my hair wet all the time. I still do when I take a shower. Unless I'm going somewhere, I don't blow dry my hair immediately, and I've never suffered from a stiff neck. But for example, I've had a friend who I saw one day and she told me, oh, my neck is so stiff because yesterday I didn't dry my hair immediately after the shower. So placebo effect, I don't know, like if you think it, I don't know. Air conditioning is apparently the devil. Like, it's just no. Because here in Italy, if you do have air conditioning, you can maybe go to a restaurant that has air conditioning. But first of all, they won't have it very high. It typically is still pretty hot in there when they have air conditioning. So they don't blast it. Not that it needs to be blasted, but it's never used like super strong. And you definitely cannot sleep with the air conditioning on. As Italians think that if you sleep with the air conditioning on, you will wake up sick, sore throat, you'll feel bad. If that's the case, I don't understand how I wasn't sick every single day of my life growing up in the US. I kind of get if the air conditioning is on.
I would say because you grew up in the U.S. Your body probably got accustomed to that. Then if you got parents and grandparents who are from the U.S., then kind of I want to say genetically, maybe we're just kind of accustomed to things. It's like when a lot of people, for example, they'll speak about traditional ways, like me, like right, like let's say we talk about something ancient, what an ancient culture did or a tribe did, and I may have that in my bloodline, but that doesn't mean I'm a traditional. That you get what I'm saying? There's a whole lot that just changed my whole dynamics here, so I can't do what they could have done. But if you got people who have been living like that for a long, long time, generation after generation, then I guess they probably I would respectfully say they probably know what works for them. They probably know what works for them.
On way too high, like it's very cold, it's like a huge blast of air, you may wake up, like I could wake up kind of feeling like a dry throat just because you have this air blasting on you. And I definitely don't think I've gotten like a full-blown cold from air conditioning. So it's another interesting fact. And then finally, another huge culture shock for me was vacation here, and also that everything basically is shut down in August. I didn't realize that many places in Italy in August basically become a ghost town if they're not by the sea. Because Italians typically use this month to travel, Italians get way more vacation time than we do in the US. In the US, you're lucky if you get like 2 weeks of vacation, but here it's very common for stores, like family-owned stores, just to completely shut down for all of August. And like I said, there is literally no one in Bologna. It really becomes a ghost town. It is scorching hot. There's barely anyone here. I did not get the memo the first year I was here, so I felt like the only poor soul left in Bologna. I was walking around the streets like, what is happening? I didn't book any vacations because I didn't know that everyone left. So now I know. I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely have a lot more culture shocks that I could have mentioned, but I didn't want this video to get too long. So let me know some interesting culture shocks that you've experienced, if you've ever moved countries before, in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and I will see you all again very soon. Bye!
Much love to her. Listen, everybody gets more vacation time than Americans. Everybody. That's something that I'm used to hearing at this point. Americans is work, well, work, 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 work. Gotta survive out here. It's really survival of the fittest. It's work, work, work. That's pretty much the culture, 24/7. But yeah, as far as how Italians do things, I feel like it's like this, right? I was studying something that was saying that different people, based on where they were from, ancient cultures, they would eat things from that land that was conducive to their DNA based on what their ancestors had already been eating for centuries prior. So you the genetics are just so different. Like, so you can have people that they may be eating pasta, or they've been doing certain things so long that it just works for their genetics, um, and they just know what works for them, right? That's like, I feel like if I was to go to like India or just somewhere else, and it would be hard for me to try to compare my genetics to what they do, even if it don't make sense. I feel like because it's just so different, so different. And even as far as the quality of air that we have in America, just the quality of things is really not the same. So it's just a big difference there. Um, but yeah, overall, she definitely seemed to enjoy it. Definitely a lot of differences there, but at the same time, I've definitely been to a lot of events or where certain pastries are definitely, yeah, breakfast for sure. For sure. I see a lot of pastries for breakfast, but she's from Arizona. So I'm from the Northeast. I'm from New York. So the cultural, I'm from where, a lot of Italians are. So literally, even in my hometown in upstate New York, on the north side is literally called Little Italy. So I guess I'm used to certain things already. So it didn't seem too just too out there for me. But yeah, one of my clients is Italian, and let me tell you, they feed their people. They like to feed their guests. I'm telling you, I be having to relax, when I go over there because the food is just on deck, on deck. But with that being said, that was a great video. Definitely a very, very nice, just a lot of good information from a nice person. Shay Jordan, Culture Shocks as an American living in Italy. Good luck on your journey. And original link will be in the description. I'll be back with more soon. If you like this video, definitely don't hesitate to hit that like, that subscribe, that notification bell, and help me out with that algorithm. And I'll see you all soon. Much love.